This is a live video broadcast as part of our lead up to Global Oneness Day. And of course, this year, Global Oneness Day is on Tuesday, October 24th. We'll share a lot more about that here shortly. But also want to welcome all of the people gathered on the Amplifield, and a big shout out to Todd Jason and all of the people who are part of the Amplifield here during this program. I'd like to invite my guests to just say hi real quick. I'm going to give them a proper introduction here shortly, Barbara and Neale.
Hi there. Very, very happy to be with you all.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with you as well.
All righty. Thank you. I'm going to give them a proper introduction here in just a second. In Humanities team, we see one presence, the divine, and see that we're all emanations of the divine. Doesn't matter how far our lives may be from reflecting this truth, it's still true. Our invitation is to live in communion with the divine and to be an authentic expression of the presence, peace, and power that are our true essence. We don't need to be perfect or excellent. In fact, when we're living in our heart, we don't even think about this. We simply live as the empowered, eternal, and authentic person that we truly are, as sons and daughters of God, if you will. And in this, we live our lives joyfully. I'd like to invite you to share your questions by placing them in the chat window here on Zoom or on the Amplifield. And we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to introduce our special guest now. Barbara Marks Hubbard has been called the voice for conscious evolution of our time by Deepak Chopra and is the subject of Neale Walsch's book, The Mother of Invention. A prolific author, visionary, social innovator, evolutionary thinker, and educator, she is the co-founder and chairperson of the Foundation for Conscious Evolution. She is the producer and narrator of the award-winning documentary series Humanity Ascending, A New Way Through Together, and has partnered with the SHIFT Network as a global ambassador for the conscious evolution movement. A shift from evolution by chance toward evolution by choice. Along with SHIFT, she launched training and formed a global team to co-produce the global multimedia event entitled Birth 2012, Co-Creating a Planetary Shift in Time. And this, of course, was on December 22nd, 2012. It was a historic turning point event, awakening the social, spiritual, scientific, and technological potential of humanity. I also want to share there's a new movie coming out about her called a documentary called American Visionary. We'll be talking about that during today's program. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
And then Neale Walsch, she is the founder of Humanities Team and a modern-day spiritual messenger whose words continue to touch the world in profound ways. Neale searched for spiritual meaning before experiencing his now famous Conversations with God book series. His first book, Conversations with God, was published in 1995 and became an international bestseller. It remained on the New York Times bestseller list for 135 weeks. 6 of his other books have made the Times list in the years since. His Conversations with God series of books has been translated into 27 languages, touching millions of lives and inspiring important changes in people's day-to-day lives. In the middle of the night on August 2nd, 2016, Neale found himself drawn into a new and totally unexpected dialogue with God, in which that dialogue emerged Conversations with God, Book 4, Awaken the Species. We'll be talking about that book also. It was just released in March of this year. Welcome, Neale.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's lovely to be here, and especially wonderful to be here with Barbara and with all of you, actually. It's just a glorious opportunity to speak to more than one other person. I'm boring my wife to death these days, so it's nice to have more than just my wife to talk to.
Okay, we've got a great audience here with us. Thank you, all of you viewers that are here with us today. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right in. We've got a lot of ground to cover here in the next hour. We're going to start out by talking about the work, Barbara and Neale's work, and then what they're up to now, and then we're going to talk about their Global Oneness Day panels, because, of course, this is a lead-up program to Global Oneness Day. Barbara, you're focused on this planetary mission, connecting co-creators worldwide. You invite people to find their unique gift to the planetary awakening in love and in oneness. On a practical level, how can people do this? How can they live this way?
People want to live this way. It is what gives us joy. It is what gives us fulfillment. But we need a context to know that everything that we can do is needed. We need a context where people are invited to give their gift. And we're hoping that the planetary mission, is a context that will invite people worldwide to say, what is it that you most want to create? And then we are inviting them to become part of what Mark Gaffney calls a unique self-symphony. Everybody's voice heard in a symphony greater than the sum of our parts. And I'll just complete that thought by saying, if there's anything we could do that could make a quick enough difference in our shift from devolution toward evolution, it would be to connect that which is already created. We're all here. There are enough. We've got the internet, and now is the time.
Awesome. Well, that certainly we're going to be coming back to that message. Now is the time. That's our call to action. I know that's a part of the call to action. And Neale, let me bring you in. Of course, in your Conversation with God book series, you share that we're all talking to God all the time. Indeed, that we are all one, and that our opportunity is to live this way as a part of the divine that we are. How can we give that practical application? How do we do that?
Well, Steve, I have a question that I invite myself to ask myself, and I invite everyone who is engaged in this personal work to ask themselves as well. And the question is really quite simple. At any choice point in my life, it could be a major choice point, like who shall I spend my life with? Who shall I marry? What city will I live in? What job will I take? Or it could be a relatively unimportant, what we think is unimportant, although there are really no unimportant choices, but a relatively small choice. What shall I have for dinner? What movie shall I go to see tonight? Will I accept that invitation to that cocktail party, and so forth? So in front of any decision at all, I ask myself a key question. I also ask myself this question, by the way, when I find myself in the middle of a circumstance. To give you an example, maybe I wake up in the morning and my sweetheart and I aren't getting along as well as we might. It happens. You live with somebody for many, many years, and you have a moment when you're just not quite on the same wavelength. And so we have that a little bit of a disagreement in the morning. And I might use that as well, that momentary experience as an opportunity to bring forth the question. And here's the magic question that I ask myself. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Excuse me. The magic question is this. What aspect of divinity is the present circumstance inviting me to demonstrate now? What aspect of divinity is the present circumstance inviting me to demonstrate now? And I usually follow that up, Steve, with a second, even more powerful question. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? As I'm sitting there eating my food in the restaurant, as I'm standing in the ticket line at the movie theater, ready to go into a motion picture I got talked into seeing, or whatever it might be, I'll ask myself this question. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And it's amazing to me how quickly, how rapidly such a question can place my exterior experience into a context that allows me to make very, very firm and important decisions on who I am, what I want to do, and how I choose to present myself into the world. And to use Barbara's turn of phrase, I'll add one final thought to that. That's not a small consideration. Who I am and how I choose to bring myself and present myself to the world is not a small consideration. If everyone did that consciously rather than unconsciously, the world would literally change overnight.
Yes, it would. No, it's not a small consideration at all. I saw something with Oprah just the other day, and she was sharing that she felt maybe her greatest contribution now was just in living her life and in by just expressing her truth, getting people to kind of get in touch with their own higher truth and their own way that they want to live their life to have as much impact as they can within their lifetime. And certainly that's what, and you're taking it to a deeper level where you bring in what is my soul's calling, because of course that's our eternal self, our larger self. So beautiful. Thank you. By the way,
could I make a comment on what?
Yes, please, Barbara.
Because I just have an additional question, Neale, that I've begun to ask. Is I feel that I'm evolving along with millions of others of us, from Homo sapiens sapiens, which is more the self-conscious, separated, brilliant species, to what I'm calling Homo universalis, a universal species. And when I do that, I took the quantum physics idea that a particle only exists when observed. So I have got an inner pattern, like you do with your soul, is if I'm feeling off, I just quickly observe the experience of being the homo universalis that I am. Like in a second, I shift my internal being. And I feel like I'm a particle when I observe myself, or else I'm an energy field where I can't quite get in touch with it. It's similar, I think, in some respects, because Homo universalis is a species that is inherently knowing it's an expression of the divine.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Barbara, for bringing that in. I wanted to just share, I referenced a chat window for questions earlier, and I should have referenced the Q&A window. And of course, on the Amplifield, you can pose questions as well. So, and we encourage you to bring in your questions and comments during the program. Thank you. Barbara, just to go a little deeper here into this, I mentioned this movie, American Visionary, this documentary, which is about bringing forth our new power now. So can we talk a little bit about that? How do we, in this documentary, how do we bring forward our new power now?
Well, the documentary is really a life story, but I think what I learned during my life is that the way we bring forth the new power now is by bringing forth that power inside ourselves for the good and finding others to co-create with, because the real joy of one's own life is the giving of our gift. And the joy of our life is to feel needed by the larger whole. So this means reaching out, saying yes, finding your partners, and joining genius is another phrase I like, is we've joined genes to have the babies. And joining genius is finding, like when Neale and I were working on Mother of Invention, I felt I was sitting there at the breakfast table every morning joining genius. And we would never be the same again after you've done that. Is that true, Neale?
Yeah, well, this much I can promise you, if you've had even one breakfast with Barbara Marks Hubbard.
We had many of them, but it was the joy of joining genius is one of nature's patterns to have us to evolve the world. It's not so much how can I be against something or even mobilize against the military-industrial complex, but finding out where the connectivity lies and going for it, and then being part of what Mark Gaffney calls a symphony of voices, which I think can end up toward the internet, awakening with the voices of those who are co-creating. And how long would it take to actually do that? A few years. So that's why I put my attention on it as what's possible now. And so the movie calls for, you see, this is one last thing about the movie. It was finished about 4 or 5 years ago, and none of this had happened. And it could have been that I had retired, but instead I have gotten newer. So they had to do a whole epilogue to say, you know, this is what happens when you age in this culture. It's very, very possible you're getting newer every day. And the reason you're getting newer is you're saying yes to more. And I actually am amazed at 87 to feel so new. And so that's the ending of the film is actually the beginning of my new life.
Okay, and we're talking about Barbara's movie, American Visionary, and I love that. I feel so new. The end of the movie is the beginning of my new life. Boy, you always have ones for the refrigerator. Thank you. Neale, I want to just come over to you. This book, Barbara and I were talking with you about your latest Conversations with God book, which is extraordinary, my God. Awakening the Species, it's Conversations with God, book 4. And of course, it talks about spiritual activism, and it says that spiritual activism is not going out to try to save the world. It's something different. What is it? What is that? What does it say spiritual activism is, Neale?
I think spiritual activism is the process that we engage when we choose to, as you said, not change the world. And the reason I emphasize that, by the way, is that most people are intimidated by the very thought that what they might do could change the world, or that somehow they need to engage in a process of changing the world. There is a way to change the world, but I'm not sure that it's about writing books or giving speeches or doing seminars or retreats. I mean, every once in a while somebody comes along who perhaps can make that kind of an impact. But the average person needs to have, as Barbara correctly pointed out, the average person needs to have a vehicle through which they can see themselves as playing an extraordinary and important role, and a role, what I want to call a role possible. Let me write a book one day called A Role Possible, that allows people to really see, oh, I get it. I see where I can fit into this small puzzle, and where I can have a real and genuine and true impact. So here's what that looks like to me. It's not about trying to change the world in the first instance. It's about self-selecting to be among those who choose to commit to moving forward their own individual and personal evolution. When we choose to move forward our own individual and personal evolution by embracing and demonstrating behaviors that serve to awaken the species to who and what we all really are, individuations of divinity. Then we demonstrate in an extraordinary way. We model behaviors that maybe that allow humanity to experience their own divinity in the expression of who they really are. That's all that any great spiritual, by the way, all that any great spiritual teacher or master has ever done. You can go back as far as Lao Tzu, or move forward through the history of people that we have labeled spiritual masters, and we find out that all they really have done is step forward as an exemplar, step forward as a model, as an kind of like you know, Pema Chodron is a good example for me. She's understood to be someone who actually demonstrates in her everyday life. She uses her life and uses herself as an exemplar. I'm not standing above anybody else. The last thing she would ever think of is that. But that just to decide to be the grandest version of the greatest vision she ever held about who she is. That's really what Barbara does. I mean, Barbara has decided, among other things, that she's going to live forever and continue putting her work into the world. But she's not doing it to impress anybody else, or to get anybody else to, you know, envy her or any of that. It's so totally outside of her sphere of influence. But she's totally involved in her own self-creation to renew and recreate herself brand new in every golden moment of now. And look what happens when a person makes that level of commitment. Then what proceeds from that, as we see as what's proceeded from Barbara, what proceeds from that, in fact, can touch and change the world. And soon, Steve, we're going to reach critical mass in the number of people who are acting like Barbara. I'm going to write another book one day called Acting Like Barbara.
I'll come and have breakfast with you again. We'll have some fun with them. We will. You know, what I want to add to what you're saying, Neale, is something Jonas Salk told me years ago. He said, it's not survival of the fittest, but survival of what fits best. And it's really like when I was a young woman with 5 children in Lakeville, Connecticut, I did not fit best. I had this particular impulse inside myself of evolutionary, you know, creativity, and I didn't know where to put it. So I tried the General Federation of Women's Clubs, or the Church Women United, or the school board. And I was industrious of going to these places where I didn't fit. And it wasn't really until I met Jonas Salk. And he called me up one day after my 5th child, still not fitting anywhere. And he said, Mrs. Hubbard, this is Dr. Salk. You wrote my vision better than I could have. It was about the theater of man. He said, we are 2 peas in the same genetic pod. Can I take you to lunch? Now, I met another evolutionary in Jonas Salk. It's a quality of a traction to what's emergent. Now, Neale, you have helped so many millions of people who may not have been exactly that, but the ones that I've been able to work with and be with and love all have a profound yearning to give their gift and have felt a little extreme or out of line with existing jobs, existing marital situations. So I am a convener right now of those who have this impulse to give their gift and need to be part of the community and the communion of that.
So Barbara, let me just follow that up with, I've been in the audience when you've invited people to share their creativity and their genius, and there's always the extroverted, smaller part of the audience that comes to their feet and comes up front. But the 3/4 of the audience is I'll call it shyer. How do you encourage them to step out in their creativity and in their genius to really activate this evolutionary impulse?
Well, I usually ask them, what attracts you? Just off the charts, just peak experience, anything. Then bring out, I feel nature has given us a signal by what attracts us. And the next step is do that. Do a bit more of that. Share that with somebody else who might resonate with you and not judge you. In my case, I was an innate evolutionary and I thought I was completely out of line. And I would see my brother, for example, and he'd say, well, tell me about the kids. And I'm meanwhile writing about the evolution of humanity. And he could not, I couldn't tell him. It wasn't on his charts to be told. But when I found, let's say, Jonas Salk and then many, many, many others, were yearning for it. So when you wrote Awaken the Species, Neale, I wanted to add that I believe there's an emerging species on Earth that is very receptive to the conversations with God and really already knowing that they're going to express their uniqueness and they need each other, and then they become a field of attraction to the ones who don't get it so easily, Steve. Not everybody has that in them, but if you meet somebody who is attracted, then you get attracted to more of what you can do. So it's a field of attraction that we're building.
I want to add, if I can, Steve, to that. One of the ways that I find people in the back of the room standing up, not just those who are already activists, because they're in, as you said, the first 3 rows of every one of our lectures. They put themselves there because they understand who they are. But everybody from the middle of the audience to the back of the hall, they're just kind of like, what is happening? Why am I here? Is this who I am? And they begin to get excited about it, but they're not the ones to stand up first. As a rule, here's how I help them to feel included and to feel good about being included. I say to them, divorce yourself from the need to produce results. See, if you are going to engage in anything, whatever it is, exterior to yourself, anything outside of your own personal experience, if you're going to engage in that because you want to, feed the hungry, clothe the poor, bring peace to the world, solve this or solve that, you're going to see the mountain is so huge to climb, and you won't necessarily see immediately the possibility of producing a sustainable and a realistic result. But I say to my audience, you know what? Divorce yourself from the need to produce a result and engage yourself in the need to produce a beginning. Because if you produce a beginning, if enough of us choose to produce a beginning, I promise you that a result will be demonstrated. And that's been shown, by the way, around the world right now. Ordinary people, ordinary everyday people, have just put somebody in the White House. Ordinary everyday people have just made some decisions about Syria. Ordinary everyday people are doing things right now in Britain with Brexit, and in France with Le Pen running, and all the rest. These are ordinary everyday people. I'm not sure that I would agree with everything that they espouse. I'm not sure I'm in agreement with, but one thing I do see is that it is simply a conglomeration of ordinary everyday people who've made a choice and made a decision. If we see the power of ordinary everyday people and don't necessarily connect it with, within 30 days, I'm going to end world hunger, but I'm going to be one of those who creates a beginning, one of those who creates critical mass. See, what we're doing here is creating critical mass. It's quite fascinating that the Roman Catholic Church calls their worship service a mass. It's not misnamed, I can tell you that, because they understand that if you can get a mass of the people moving in one direction and serving a unified purpose, you can produce extraordinary results. And nobody can argue that there have been some good results produced by the world's great religions. They happen to be incomplete, in my opinion, with regard to their understandings of God and who we are, but they have done some good in the world. Now what you have to do is just stop them from doing the bad in the world that some of their followers have sadly generated. But so how I get the guy in the back of the room to stand up and say, I'm in, is I say, you know what, decide that you are going to be among those who self-selects. I have self-selected to be among those who create a beginning, among those who's going to add to the process by which we generate critical mass. And when we achieve critical mass, which is not as high a number as you might think, suddenly the first domino falls, the snowball rolls downhill, and we see evolutionary and revolutionary change on the earth.
This is so true, Neale. And another way of looking at it is everyone is unique. And when that uniqueness in you, I think of it as the impulse of creativity uniquely as you, as everyone. And the very fortunate ones among us get something that triggers that uniqueness so that you can become an expression of your own uniqueness. And when you do that, it's self-rewarding. When you're giving your gift, and if somebody can receive it, I call it the compass of joy. There's an inner compass between stress and joy. And the compass of joy is when the gift that you've been given is being given and being received. And it's the self-rewarding action that gives you self-actualization. Nature is really designed for us to do this. So far from being selfish and happy by gaining more for ourselves, we are the most happy when we are giving our gift and it's being received and loved. And I think that the world is going to be evolved to chosen self joining to create, or joining genius to create a new world.
And this, of course, is the work of Humanity's Team. One of the wonderful things about Humanity's Team is that it is exactly that, a team of people who
exactly
humanity's new decision and new choice. So Humanity's Team gives us an opportunity to gather together in a united effort, in a joint effort, in a co-creative process that allows us to move forward the evolutionary agenda of the human species.
And you know, I've worked with Humanity's Team for several years on many of the programs using the Wheel of Co-Creation and fleshing it out with innovators in every sector. I think we did that for 2 years, didn't we, Steve? So
we did, yeah, and you still are a part of these 12 programs.
Yeah, so I've been really appreciating it so much, and also conscious business that you're doing. And yes. Neale might like my opening remark on conscious business is that the universe is a great business. Look what it made out of nothing at all, folks. Entrepreneurship is the way evolution works.
All right, thank you for that. Well, you can see a moderator's job sometimes is just to be quiet and Neale doing all the work for me. I don't need to come in here. But it's funny that we've got some common themes here, which is the end is really the beginning, and that we don't need to be concerned about the destination. It's just expressing in the journey. Yeah, that we're a part of the divine, and just standing in that, in the real power and presence and peace. That we're a son and daughter of God. I mean, that's amazing. Hercules had to go through quite a struggle to learn that.
Yeah.
And here all of us know that today, and hopefully kids growing up in the world are getting in touch with that they're actually offspring of the divine, a part of the divine. And in that, isn't there just amazing power, just that understanding alone, which Conversations with God just brings through so powerfully. And then, Barbara, where you bring in the dimension of just each of us getting in touch with our creativity and genius that is divinity itself. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and we're going to talk about conscious business. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Barbara, thank you for bringing that in. But I thought first we'd talk a little bit about your Global Oneness Day panels. We're going to bring in questions from listeners too. Barbara, I'll just ask you about your panel first. Of course, you've got this amazing panel called Human Consciousness Shift, and Barbara Barnett Bain, Joan Borisenko, and Barbara Fields are part of this Human Consciousness Shift panel. What are some of the things that you might want to explore as part of that Global Oneness Day panel this year?
Well, let's see. Barnett, of course, has made a wonderful movie. And I'll tell you something about Barnett. He is one of the best conversationalists I've ever known. I used to have dinner with Barnett when I lived in Santa Barbara every other week, and he would drive up from Los Angeles. So I would start with Barnett, the conversation. I really would. I mean, you never know where the conversation is going to go with him. So that would be number one, is to let that wonderful spontaneity emerge in my panel. And then with Joan, of course, she's so brilliant and can speak particularly on the field of health and creativity. And with Joan, I'd like to remind her when we were at Bharat's in Australia, we lived in a big house together with her partner and myself. And every day we got up and we checked in and we became friends. That's another thing I'm really enjoying is friendship. A deep, deep communion, friendship, co-creation, how we can create together. And then with Barbara Fields, well, she has been my partner for so many years. I miss her a lot, but we've done a great, she was my neighbor in Santa Barbara. I think she's one of the finest organizers of anything in the world. She's organized my mentor program. And it's another thing just to get that unique presence of her out there. I think as I get more cosmic and global, I'm also more personal.
Boy, they have just extraordinary stories, all of them. Of course, Barnett Bain, What Dreams May Come, and these other amazing movies that he's directed and produced. And Joan Borisenko, who was on the faculty at Harvard Business School, and then just through an incident that involved her father, she fell out of that whole path and now became the amazing leader that she is, that bridges mind-body science. And then Barbara Fields, who's the extraordinary executive director of the Association for Global New Thought. So that's going to be an incredible panel. It's called Human Consciousness Shift. And by the way, if you go to globalonesssummit.org or just Google Global Oneness Day, you'll see globalonesssummit.org. You'll see the amazing speakers that are part of Global Oneness Day this year. You can register there. It's going to be an extraordinary program. Neale, if I can come over to you for your panel, which is called Sacred Action. That's going to also be an extraordinary panel. And of course, Marianne Williamson, Andrew Harvey, and Rabbi Michael Lerner are joining you on this Sacred Action panel. Can you talk about some of the things that you might want to explore as part of this Sacred Action discussion this year?
Well, I know that I am personally going to be exploring the differences in behaviors between an awakened species and humans who are living in an unawakened state. Because I believe that sacred activism, as I mentioned, not to beat a drum too loudly, but I do believe that sacred activism best begins. I'm going to write a book one day called Best Beginnings. I think that sacred activism best begins right here, with one's own experience of and expression of self. And so what I'm going to be discussing in the Sacred Activism panel is how we might shift our own internal awareness, understanding, consciousness, and ultimately our behaviors and our expression of self. How we can shift that and change our behaviors so that our behaviors, in fact, more accurately reflect and represent, that is, present again, they represent our highest thoughts about what it means to be living as an awakened species. I was given in book 4, 16, a list of 16 behaviors that allow us to measure if you please, or to take an assessment, an honest self-assessment. Not that we need to share it with anybody else. It's a very private process, but an honest self-assessment. How am I doing here? And in what way are my present day behaviors reflecting the behaviors of highly evolved beings throughout the cosmos, of an awakened species? So I'll be talking about that, and I'll be actually giving people in that panel that list of 16 behaviors as a little yardstick, as a little just a ruler that they can lay down and say, well, how am I doing? How am I doing with regard to these behaviors? I'll give you just one example, just to give you an example. An awakened species, having seen and acknowledged what works, will always do what works. But an unawakened species, even though they see what works, actually often does exactly the opposite. So we get to ask ourselves, since I know what works, why would I wind up doing exactly the opposite of what works? And might that be one of the shifts, one of the changes that could occur in my own individual behavior? I ask myself that every time I go to the refrigerator and reach for the key lime pie. I know it doesn't work for me to have sweets from, for morning, noon, and night, and occasional dessert here and there, fine. But to overload on sugar all the time, listen, it simply doesn't work. I don't need to be convinced of that. The evidence is clear, and I'm pretty certain about that. So what causes me, and I use a silly example with regard to sweets just to make the point. The point is, what causes me to engage in behaviors that I know ahead of time simply don't work if I'm clear about the outcomes that I wish to produce? So I'll be talking about that during my time on the panel, and giving people an opportunity to assess how they're doing and the progress they've made with regard to shifting their internal and external expression of self such that it becomes in alignment with our grandest thought. A last idea here, it's not that we don't know what our grandest thought is. Most people are pretty clear. Most people understand pretty much. When I start talking to audiences, heads are nodding, people are shaking their head, yes, I get that, I get that, I get that. So, and I'm among those who say, yes, I get that, I get that. But then I ask myself, if I get that, why don't I do that? I'm going to write a book one day called If You Get It, Why Don't You Do It?
Okay.
Beautiful.
Steve, can I say something that I think for Global Oneness Day, it would be a really amazing thing? I believe that mass resonance of people already emerging in some type of shared field can make a difference for collective consciousness. Particularly when it's a global event and it's on notice. Yeah, and I'll tell you, I had a brief encounter. Somebody made a mistake when I was speaking somewhere, and I got to speak to 1,000 followers of David Wilcox. Now, David, he's a very brilliant man who's totally about encounters with extraterrestrials. And I said, I had to laugh. I said, well, folks, I know why I'm here. Because if we actually do want to have any encounters with extraterrestrials, we better get our act together here on Earth. And what is required is mass cooperation, resonance, and a field of harmony here. Well, they cheered. Then David Wilcox, I said, David, you come on up here. So David comes up with 1,000 of his followers and myself. And he interviewed me about reincarnation and all these things. And we both agreed that the harmony on Earth, or resonance among our awakening species, ourselves, is the signal for further contact. And I wonder, Steve, since it's going to be Global Oneness Day, can there be, let's say, 15 minutes sometime where we have a harmonic and we actually feel resonance as a species, awakening together on planet Earth in love of each other, of the Earth, and whatever is beyond us? It seems we should not only just have the separate panels. And I'm wondering if there would be any way to do that.
Gosh, you know what's funny is we have that planned.
Really?
Jonathan Goldman, yeah, has a 15-minute program on Global Oneness Day that's a harmonic, where he brings in, of course, he's the founder of sound healing and has created this extraordinary sound healing experience. And he's got a 15-minute program during Global Oneness Day where he does exactly that. And then Pierre Pradervan, who wrote The Gentle Art of Blessing. He's written a blessing for Global Oneness Day, a 15-minute program that's right in that time frame too. And of course, we can bring this energy into your panel too, Barbara, your Human Consciousness Shift panel. So I've made a note to bring you, and I can talk about this a little before Global Oneness Day. Of course, it's Tuesday, October 24th, so it's out there a ways. We've got a little time here to plan these panels.
Let's do it with a sense of expectation. You know, if I've been saying for years, our crisis is a birth. Now that's the theme. What we're being born toward what? And I believe that will activate absolutely everything. I think it was Neale who said to me, that experience of a direct encounter that was shared would be the biggest jump on earth that could happen. And why don't we be the ones to invite it? I mean, literally, not just Jonathan Goldman, but a collective yearning to become one planetary body while being open to what's beyond us in love.
Yes, and of course, the title of your panel, Human Consciousness Shift, encapsulates that, doesn't it? So
it does. But I'm just wondering if there could be something dramatic for Global Oneness Day, and that we would all know that at a certain time, no matter when our panel was, that everybody would agree to experience and align and evoke and ask. I'll tell you one last thing. I once was asked by NASA as to how to welcome species from another dimension. And there were all these scientific things and how to send out quotes and various scientific statements. And I said, why don't we just say welcome?
Right. Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Oh, and so they put me top of the list of NASA responses. This is with the Carl Sagan type thing.
Right.
Welcome. We're just being born. I mean, is that nice? It's sort of adorable.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Anyway,
and I don't think anybody would argue with you that that our crisis precedes the birth, because certainly we can see that.
Well, let's say we're in the birth now. We're being born. Yeah. Global Oneness Day and Humanities Team is helping to usher in awareness of oneness and wholeness.
Yeah, wonderful. Again, as a moderator, I don't even need to bring in the Humanities Team story. You all are doing a beautiful job for me, Neale and Barbara, and thank you. So let me just share a couple things here. First, I want to just share, we're talking about Global Oneness Day. We're a nonprofit, 501c3, and we produce, this is the 8th Global Oneness Day this year. It costs us about $250,000 to produce the program. We're almost all volunteer. A lot of people don't know that. So it's actually made possible by people like you, viewers that come in, that participate, and also that want to financially contribute to Humanities Team, and Global Oneness Day, so that we can continue to expand our reach. We estimated over 100,000 participated last year in 2016. So if you want to, as part of your being the change that you want to see in the world, if you'd like to contribute, we invite you to go to the humanitiesteam.org website. There's a yellow button at the top that says donate. You can click on that and give $50 or $15 or $5 or whatever you might be inspired to contribute to support Global Oneness Day. As well, I want to share we are doing the program on the Amplifield again this year. So to all of you on the Amplifield, looking forward to this 12+ hour program. It's going to be in video. We're adding videos. So just like today's program, this 12+ hour program will be in video. It's free. And if you miss the program, the following weekend, it's going to be free as well. So thank you to all of you for your generosity and helping us expand the reach of Global Oneness Day. Let me cut over to this conscious business discussion here real quick, because both of you are founding signatories of the Conscious Business Declaration. Thank you for that. And of course, conscious business is about shrinking the unconscious economy and growing the conscious economy, where it's about more than money. It's about love and peace and service and just all of these things that we've been talking about, where we're living in as part of the divine, in our divinity, in our creativity, in our genius, and where we're serving, our larger self with a capital S, which is the world around us. And where we're doing that in a business context, isn't that beautiful? Where the business in the boardroom is no longer just about financial profit. Instead, we give full meaning to the word profit, which of course profit means success and growth and nurturing and service and all of those things. Profit was never meant to just be about financial profit. So would you all like to, Barbara, you brought this in a minute ago, and Neale, can I come to you first on this conscious business? And you of course have been in these webinars that we've been doing supporting the conscious business curriculum and faculty and a community of service, a community of practice, etc. Do you want to just talk about the importance of conscious business first, and then Barbara?
Well, I don't want to be predictable here, so predictable, but I'm going to be anyway. The whole reason that we are alive, it seems to me, is to express and to experience, to announce and to declare, to become and to fulfill who we really are. I call that largely and loosely the process by which we evolve. We become greater and greater demonstrations of that. I think that's why life exists in the cosmos, actually, in the universe of universes. We're no longer living in a single universe. Physicists have just recently told us that actually our universe is a universe, one universe in a universe of universes. So it turns out that we live in a multiverse. And there must be some reason behind that. And so how this relates to the Conscious Business Initiative in my world is this way. Business is one of the things that we do, and it's one of the things that we do perhaps with more passion and more attention and more energy than many of the other things that we do in our lives. I'm not sure it should be that way, but it certainly is that way now. So the question is, since that's the process of business takes such a large portion of human life, what energy are we pouring into that process? How are we engaging in that interaction with others that we call business? And as Steve mentioned a minute ago, for what reason? How are we defining the reasons that we're doing that? And so what the Conscious Business Initiative is about is giving us an opportunity to explore that very question. What is the business we're actually in, and why are we doing that? And to use my magic question from a half hour ago, what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? I can tell you right now that if every business owner and every business manager, and for that matter, every business employee, went to work in the morning and they asked themselves as they're driving to the workplace, what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And if they took the answer to that question, the answer that will become very clear to you, by the way, if they took the answer to that question into the workplace, they would find the workplace turning into a joy place, because they would find themselves realizing, oh my gosh, there is a direct connection, and I didn't see it before now. There's a direct connection between what I'm doing to what I thought was earn a living, and I see that I'm doing something more than that. A lady named Terry Whitaker a few years ago gave me a wonderful plaque, and I never forgot it, not so much for what it said about me, but the turn of phrase was so memorable that I've used it ever since, and I have to credit Terry for it. Terry said, Neale, you are one of the courageous ones, someone who's chosen to make a life rather than a living. I want to give that to every employee, to every manager, and to every business owner in America. I want Humanity's team to have an award that they give that says you are one of the courageous ones, someone who's chosen to make a life rather than a living. So what is the Conscious Business Initiative all about? It's about turning your business experience into your life experience, that you make a life and not simply a living. And the Conscious Business Initiative provides the tools, by the way, because these are all wonderful words. Wonderful pie in the sky, airy-fairy, wonderful conceptualizations. You know, it's all up here. But my life is about getting it from here, and even from here in my heart, here into my hands. You know, from my head to my heart to my hands. Because the spirituality that has no practical application in my world is bankrupt. I'm not interested in the spirituality that has no application right here in my two hands. So what the Conscious Business Initiative is about is providing you with the tools to take these wonderful conceptual frameworks and put them right here in your hand, so that what you're doing every day with your body as we do the business of life together demonstrates what the business of life is truly all about.
Yeah, thank you, boy. Beautiful, Neale. And isn't it, and living, having our work reflect our values. I mean, why haven't we done that already? Conscious business is so natural, isn't it? It's a wonder that in this day and age, here in 2017, that most businesses, or a lot of businesses, unconscious. And certainly there's an invitation here for all of business to become conscious business, to create a new standard of business here in the 21st century and beyond. Barbara, we're going to come over to you here. And as I just want to share, I was referencing webinars. There are people that are going through training now to become conscious business change agents, CBCAs. And if you go to the Humanities Team website and click on Conscious Business at the top, you can learn more about this Conscious Business Change Agent program. Over to you, Barbara, on just thoughts about the emerging conscious business.
Well, I'd like to speak on behalf of entrepreneurship in that context, because what is so great about entrepreneurs is they have a desire to create something that they want to create, and they have to be businesslike in order to do it. So they're combining two things. They're not just hired to do a job that may or may not be their purpose. They come together for that purpose, and they have to have the business skills to do it. I'd like to tell you something I'm doing that I think is very fascinating with my friend Mark Donahue, who's from Babson College. He invited me to do a book called Evolutionary Entrepreneurs. And we're saying that an entrepreneur is a form of conscious evolution. And if you look at the really large-scale entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Peter Diamandis, that type of person, of which Donahue knows a lot, is we are saying to them, okay, evolution gave you power. The most powerful entities on this earth are evolutionary entrepreneurs. It's not government, it's not science, it's not some of the older, certainly not religion. And so in doing this book with Mark Donahue, and that nature gave power to evolutionary entrepreneurs, we're saying that small-scale entrepreneurship within the fold of larger-scale entrepreneurship may be the most exciting moment of creating the new future, because government is not going to do it. Win-lose democracy is not structured currently to be able to evolve a culture. So I'm going to become an advocate of entrepreneurship, and I'm going to enjoy meeting Richard Branson, Peter Diamandis, etc., speaking to them and bringing in the high technology geniuses with the entrepreneurial geniuses. And what you have there is a huge capacity to evolve the world, so that those of us who may not be entrepreneurs, by calling upon and inspiring and being part of the creative entrepreneurship culture, is something that I think has not been noticed as well as it could be. And I hope you will help with that, Steve, and Neale as well, to actually see what's going on here with this power.
Absolutely. Well, we are partners in that, and of course we've done many programs together, and we'll do many more. And Neale, thank you also for just being out front on in this area of conscious business. I'm going to bring in a question here from Tilly, but first let me just share for people that haven't been to consciousbussinessdeclaration.org, the website where the 4 NGOs that created this Conscious Business Declaration, it's their website. Humanities Team, the Club of Budapest, the Goy Peace Foundation, and the Fowler Center for Business created the Conscious Business Declaration. If you go to consciousbussinessdeclaration.org, you can read about the initiative. It's a short, there are 7 principles for what conscious business is, and if you resonate with the principles, we invite you to sign it, and invite your coworkers and friends and family to sign it as well. Let me bring in a question here from a listener. Neale, if I can direct this one to you. It says, the discovery that divinity is within us can be accessed through faith is finally being recognized. How far along is the mental health field, and I might even just add to the mental health field, just society, in accepting this as a reality rather than some grandiose and delusional thinking?
I think more people are in the place of accepting it as our reality than we might imagine. I think that we are now seeing increasingly and with exponential increase of the number of people who embrace their oneness with divinity. That number is remarkably higher than we think it is. Barbara has a turn of phrase that she used to use years ago. I don't know whether she's still calling them cultural creatives, but people who are aware of their origin, of their identity, that they are in fact an expression of divinity, that in fact there is only one thing, all things are one thing, and there's only one thing in the universe, and that's what we call the pure energy, the essential essence, or if you please, the divine. So how far along are we? You know, I haven't done any scientific studies, but I would suggest, just my stomach tells me, somewhere around 35 to 40% of the people are now starting to feel that sense of divinity flowing through them, in them, and as them. I think we still have 60 or 65% perhaps of the population of the planet not quite there yet, but we are rapidly reaching critical mass in the number of people who sense that, you know, it must be true that there's something more going on here than meets the eye. Or as my wonderful, wonderful friend Bill Shakespeare once put it, I thought beautifully, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Yeah. You know, I'd like to add a thought to this about evolution. Evolution used to be considered just as a purely scientific, random behavior. And what's really happening now through this deep scientific understanding of evolution is that it's directional, purposeful, and moving to higher order continuously. And we are an expression of that. So the entire story of creation is being rewritten. It's not the old myths. There's one sacred story that humanity now has. It's the sacred story of our evolution. As part of the multiverse, we are this particular universe, this particular Big Bang, this particular evolution. It was not discovered until the 1960s. Einstein thought it was an eternal universe. The very idea, it's an evolving universe, is what moved me into my life pattern. And then I realized, of course, that the direction of evolution was in every one of us. And when you say yes to that inner impulse that we're talking about, Neale, to do one's best, you're saying yes to an evolutionary impulse. And what I'm noticing personally in my life, I've said yes to the impulse, and the impulse is saying yes to me.
I think that the evidence that, in answer to the original question that started this particular discussion, the evidence of how far we've come is, in fact, the fact that a book like, and many other books similar to it, but a book like Conversations with God would never have been published 50 years ago. It probably wouldn't have been published 30 years ago. I'm not altogether sure it would have been published 25 years ago, except by perhaps some way out esoteric publisher. But the fact that it became a commonly embraced notion that we might have a conversation with God, and that the concepts in that conversation that said that we are all one, the fact that that produced millions and millions of people reading that book in 37 languages around the world, suddenly we see that level of, at least what I want to call embracing the possibility. I'm going to write a book one day called Embracing the Possibility.
You've got a lot of books, Neale, a lot of books still to write.
Because we see that humanity is prepared now to embrace possibilities it wasn't even considering 15 or 25 years ago. And that's because of the work of people just like Barbara Marks Hubbard, as an example, because she has placed before us a daring challenge and an exciting invitation. Are you prepared to embrace the possibility of who you are, what you can do, what lives inside of you, and the possibility of how you can cause that to arise in the world at large? She's made an extraordinary difference and an incredible change on this planet. Listen to every word she says, capture everything that she writes, and pay attention to all that exudes from her. Because she is an American visionary. She's actually a global visionary, and I'm not just throwing roses at her. I love her to pieces, but I also recognize and honor exactly who she is. And I want to say this finally. Because I honor and recognize who she is, I see the possibility of her in every single human being. One day I get to be like Barbara.
Well, Neale,
all right, well, let that be the last word, because we're at the end of the program. Neale, this is true of you too, and Conversations with God books, which have just impacted so many lives, including my own. So you're extraordinary. And thank you. And what a fabulous program. This hour's gone fast. I wish we had another hour. But we do have Global Oneness Day ahead. And again, Neale will anchor this panel called A Sacred Action. And Barbara's anchoring this panel called Human Consciousness Shift. So go to globalonenesssummit.org. Be sure to register. And we'll see you on the Amplifield platform. We'll be broadcasting in audio too, but on the Amplifield platform, it's going to be video, and you can see the whole 12-hour program there. You can register at globalonenesssummit.org. And of course, Global Oneness Day is Tuesday, October 24th. So be sure to put that whole day, put Global Oneness Day on your calendar, Tuesday, October 24th.